Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to get started in just a few moments. Great. Okay, as it's 11:03, we're going to get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Clement, and I will be your host and moderator for today's dialogue, Promoting Food Security in Higher Education. I'm a Master of Social Work student at UBC Okanagan, and I've been working alongside Campus Health for the last year on a long-term food security project focused on developing a center for well-being and food security on campus. My background is in organic agriculture, having spent the last 6 seasons growing vegetables, flowers, and seeds. I have a strong vested interest in creating resilient and just food systems, and I'm very excited and honored to be here today as part of the conference. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm an uninvited guest on the unceded territory of the Syilx Okanagan Nation. And because we are about to dive into a conversation about food, food systems, waterways, and food security, we must also be explicit about the numerous ways in which Indigenous food systems, food sovereignty, and access to traditional country foods and traditional practices of hunting, gathering, and fishing have been disrupted by historic and ongoing colonization of Indigenous lands and food systems. I also want to recognize the multitude of injustices that exist within our food systems, including the injustices experienced by migrant workers and the disproportionately high rates of food insecurity amongst BIPOC and other systemically oppressed individuals and communities. No food system can be considered just until Indigenous food sovereignty is acknowledged, restored, and reconciled, and we have a long way to go. One suggestion is to look at the Indigenous Food Systems Network for resources, information, or more, or to look up your local land back defenders in action and find out how you can support. I would also like to acknowledge that you are joining us today from many places near and far, and acknowledge the traditional owners and caretakers of those lands. As we begin with a few pieces of housekeeping, feel free to say hello in the Zoom chat and share where you're joining from today. Please note that the session runs today from 11 PST to 12:30 PST, which is 1.5 hours, not 2 hours, as I believe your calendar invitation might indicate. If you're experiencing any audio or video issues, please reach out via the Zoom chat for assistance. Feel free to have your video on or off, and the audience will be muted so that speakers can be heard clearly. If you have questions or comments for our speakers, please put them in the chat box, as this will be monitored and we'll have time for some audience questions towards the end. This event is also available in French, so to switch your language to French, navigate to the bottom of your Zoom screen and you'll see a world symbol for interpretation. Click on the symbol and it will give you the option of English or French. Select French. If you would like to switch back to English, click the world symbol again and select English. You don't need to take any action if you would like to listen in English. This event is being recorded and you can find it on the UBC Wellbeing YouTube channel, and a link will also be embedded on the event webpage. If you would like to remove your name from Zoom, as the event will be published, click on the participants button at the top of the Zoom window. Next, hover your mouse over the name in the participants list on the right side of the Zoom window and click rename. I'm seeing lots of people in the chat from different places: Vancouver, Syilx Okanagan Territory, University of Alberta. Yeah, that's great. Cambrian College in Sudbury. So feel free to keep typing in there and saying where you're from. It's really nice to see everyone's names. Okay, the housekeeping is now done, and I'd like to provide you with a brief overview of how this conference came to be and our intentions for this month's events and beyond. So this virtual conference came together through a collaboration between staff and faculty from the University of British Columbia, McMaster University, University of Guelph, University of Ottawa, and Meal Exchange. A question we asked as a group was, how do we support and learn from each other as we strive to understand and alleviate food insecurity on our campuses? One way is this conference, an opportunity to bring people together from across Canada to explore how we can address complex intersectional issues such as food security. So this month, you have the opportunity to engage in learning sessions, network with colleagues, participate in empathy mapping, as well as co-inform the development of principles to support institutional work. A second way is the development of a network or coalition of Canadian institutions that actively engage in knowledge exchange, research, and advocacy, for example. How will we do this? An excellent question that we hope to dive deeper into throughout this conference, including at our final session, March 31st, entitled, How Will We Make Change Together? In preparation for the final event, we want to hear how you'd like to engage and connect beyond this month. So to facilitate this, a short survey will be emailed out in the coming weeks. Today in our second event, it's part of our month-long virtual conference, and we're asking, what do we know? What is the state of food security research? And how do we begin building dialogue as we seek to promote food security within our campus communities? In today's session, we aim to provide you with an overview of a variety of food security related research projects and approaches happening within Canada. We will first hear presentations of the Canadian Campus Wellbeing Survey and the Voice Research Project, followed by 4 rapid research presentations. We will have the opportunity to ask our panelists audience questions at the end, so please at any time submit your questions into the chat and we will collate and ask as many as we can. So first, we'll hear from Dr. Guy Faulkner, professor and chair in applied public health in the School of Kinesiology at UBC. He currently coordinates the Canadian Campus Wellbeing Survey and will be sharing more on this. So go ahead, Guy.
Just give me a second while I share my screen. Okay, well, good morning, everyone. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that today I'm actually in my office on the Vancouver campus. I go to work on Thursdays. It's very exciting. So I'd very much like to acknowledge that I'm currently on the traditional, ancestral and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And thank you for attending this session. I've been asked to talk about the Canadian Campus Wellbeing Survey, which I think might be one source of data about food security in terms of current research and also future research projects. So just to give you a brief background, I don't want to go into too much detail about the survey and its development, but the vision of the CCWS is to develop a comprehensive and coordinated evaluation system for Canadian post-secondary student mental health and physical.
Oh, you're frozen there, Guy.
May be familiar that some institutions participate and have in the past in the National College Health Assessment Survey, which is coordinated by the American College Health Association. Well, the CCWS was developed to be a Canadian alternative to that system that could be implemented nationally at any institution, whether it's a college or a university, whether it's a Francophone institution or an English institution, and to collect information about the health and well-being of students. And it fulfills a dual purpose. One is, I consider, and the CCWS is principally a quality assurance or a quality improvement tool so that post-secondary institutions can collect information about mental health and physical health of their student population because they want to do something about the health and well-being of their students, that they want to identify priority areas, they want to identify where policy considerations or programs are required to support the mental and physical health of their students. Now, part of the point of doing the CCWS is that it's a core module that have the exact same questions, so that institutions can also contribute their data to a larger anonymized data set so that you can start to compare one's own institution with benchmarks, not necessarily other specific institutions, but again, if you're a rural college and you're participating in the CCWS, then you could compare your findings to other rural colleges participating in the CCWS, for example. And that's a bit of the longer term vision, which we're really spending more time thinking about now, is how do we develop that platform for knowledge exchange, so that you could identify, perhaps an area where, if your institution has, you're concerned about food security, you could look at other institutions where there is higher or better food security, and look to see, well, what are those institutions doing? What kind of policies and programs do they have that may explain the variability in the problem or area of interest, such as food security? So that's principally what the first purpose is quality assurance for institutions. But there's also a research data set that comes from that this shared data set, which institutions are contributing to, can also be accessed by individual researchers. They could be accessed by organizations such as a Public Health Agency of Canada. For example, they're very interested in accessing the CCWS data on vaping at the moment, because that is of an interest to them. And so this is something that is governed by a data access committee that we have that considers requests for data and ultimately can provide approval once ethics has been approved at an individual institution. And really the bottom line for the consideration is ensuring that institutions are not identifiable in any analyses that a researcher may be interested in. And so that's why, again, I think I'm here today is to kind of advertise the CCWS as potentially a data set that you may be interested in working with to explore issues of interest related to food security. Give you a very brief background that we started the CCWS in the spring of 2018 in terms of bringing in stakeholders from across Canada to identify the priorities of measurement in a student level survey. We then identified those priorities, which I'll come to. We brought together research experts, primarily epidemiologists, to identify what are the best measures for those priority constructs. And they're very much aligned with Canadian population surveys anyway, so that you could compare data from the CCWS with the Canadian Community Health Survey, for example, or the Canadian Health Measures Survey, which are the large national surveys run by Statistics Canada. We then did some feasibility testing before piloting at UBC and Langara College in 2019. And then in the spring of this year, largely pre-COVID, we actually deployed the CCWS at all post-secondary institutions in BC were invited to participate, and approximately 20 did. And then in the fall of this year, of last year, 2020, the Atlantic region participated, and at the moment, Saskatchewan is participating. And so I highlight that the BC, Saskatchewan, Atlantic, those are just cohorts that have, at a provincial level, have decided to participate in the CCWS at the same time. But throughout all of 2020 and 2021, we have institutions from across Canada, from different provinces participating in the CCWS. I just kind of outlined those as that they are cohorts. And we are, for want of a better word, open for business to institutions moving forward. And again, if an institution is interested in participating in the CCWS, I'll give you the link at the end that you can check that out. So what does a CCWS measure? One of the challenges for us was trying to develop a survey that took no more than 20 minutes to complete. That was our kind of bottom line. And so we can't ask everything, but these were the core domains that were seen as priorities to measure. And again, I just highlight there that the food security, we use the 6-item short form version of the Household Food Security Survey module. But again, there are, just to highlight, that we do accept and are interested in developing modules to the CCWS. So again, the CCWS is designed to be modular. This is the core module, but then institutions could elect to include additional modules if they are of interest. So again, this is another open invitation. If there is interest in developing a specific module that goes into greater detail about food security, then that could be done, and then that could be developed as an optional module that any institution can participate. Now, in a way, our first module that we have done is based on advocacy from UBC, is to make the 18-item household food security survey module available for institutions. So the CCWS institutions can choose to use the 6-item or the 18-item module now, and indeed, UBC is electing to use the 18-item module, and a couple of other institutions as well are already using that module as well. And another highlight the thing to highlight is the survey is in French as well, or available in French. I just wanted to quickly look or let you know some of the demographics that may be of interest, of course, to understand who has greater or less food security. The CCWS has some items that are self-reported, and some are linked to cohort file variables, so that we don't ask those questions, but we can link the student level data to those variables that you see on the right. And again, I think we've certainly taken a lot of feedback, and in terms of how do we ask some of those questions, particularly around identification, but some of these items will give you a sense perhaps of what you could explore regarding food security with the CCWS data. Another point to highlight in using the CCWS is the feedback mechanism. This is how we give data back to institutions. We give data back to institutions in terms of a raw data file, so the actual raw data. But we're also using this Tableau software interface as a way to visually give data back to institutions. And this Tableau software we've found has been very useful for institutions that don't have a lot of research capacity or institutional research capacity to dig into the data. And just to kind of quickly give you an example, this is just some made up data looking at the items regarding academic achievement. And essentially what we have here is kind of a breakdown of the kind of responses for one's institution, but then you can also compare it to other institutional data. You can see on the right some of those demographic variables that you could choose to look at tabulations, cross tabulations. And we also just flag statistical comparisons, look using effect sizes, so that an institution can quickly see whether or not, where significant differences lie between their own institution and their benchmark that they are using. And we provide institutions with up to 2 benchmarks. So you could choose to look at a provincial level. I'd like to compare my institution to the rest of the province. Or it could be, I want to compare my institution to the rest of the U15 research intensive institutions. So again, there is, as more and more institutions participate in the CCWS, it provides us with greater capacity, provide choice for institutions as to what their benchmarks might be. I'm just going to have a very brief overview of the spring 2020 results. This is just the BC data. And I wanted to kind of highlight the BC data just because this, again, was largely pre-COVID. And I'll tell you why I want to highlight that. So this was BC. So actually 18 institutions, not 20, from BC participated, over 17,000 students. Big success. It took less than 20 minutes to complete, on average 17 minutes. The response rate is always a kind of a concern for surveys such as this. And I just wanted to flag that we know that best practice, when we have institutions who are providing at least 3 or more reminders, providing incentives, and provide a communication strategy conveying to students the importance of the survey, and that the institution is going to respond to the data from the survey, is pretty important for response rates. there is a way to look at, given that we're collecting institutional cohort variables, there is a way to at least look at your response of your participants in terms of comparing who answers the survey to who you invited to complete the survey, which allows you to kind of make some kind of sense as to whether or not the sample is representative of your institution, not necessarily representative of, in this case, the province as a whole. But just quickly to jump to food security, again, this is the aggregate measure, just looking at the food security questions, and you can see that around of the BC sample, 36% were responding that there was low or very low food security. And I just wanted to kind of flip, because I was interested, and this is, we need to be careful comparing the Atlantic region to BC, but this is just the data that I asked the data analyst to pull yesterday, and this is ongoing, but it looked, it's interesting here, around 30% were reporting low or very low food security in the COVID environment. So the research data set, again, is something that is accessed by a data access committee. We have a committee that of researchers and institutional research representatives that provide an overview of requests. But it's important that the data set is available, I think, for Canadian researchers who are interested in looking at either repeat or cross-sectional analyses of particular questions. And this is for using the aggregated data. If your institution has participated in the CCWS, then it's up to your institution, how that data is used. That is not of concern necessarily to the data access committee. Our focus is more if a researcher wants to access an aggregated data set. We have a website, ccws/becc.ca, and Data Access Publications has the information, the data access policy, and the steps required to submit a request. And again, as the researcher, I'm interested in supporting access to the CCWS as a research database. And to just give you an example, this is the first paper that is being published it's in press at the moment using the CCWS data. Of course, my interest is in physical activity, and we have new 24-hour movement guidelines for adults that provides guidelines about physical activity, but also sedentary behavior and sleep. And so we were able to look in the first kind of data set where those questions were asked to understand the prevalence of post-secondary students meeting those guidelines, approximately 10%. It was interesting that females and older students were more likely to meet these guidelines, which is the opposite of what we've seen in the past when we just look at physical activity guidelines. Males and younger students are more likely to meet those. And the survey, the CCWS, now is being used as a mechanism for monitoring the implementation of those guidelines. And again, the Canadian Campus Wellbeing Survey is also one way of measuring implementation of the new standard on post-secondary mental health as well. So the CCWS could be used, again, from an institutional perspective to understand the health and well-being of their students, but it could also be used as an evaluation tool for monitoring ongoing implementation of national and provincial territorial initiatives. And so that is a brief overview of the CCWS, and I'm happy to take any questions at the end of the session when it comes to the question time.
Thank you so much, Guy. I think that that presentation is a great place to start our conversation. And now we're going to continue it. And so we'll welcome Casey Hamilton, Marisa Mikulev, and Kim Rutledge from the UBC Okanagan Voice Research Project, a student-led community-based participatory action research project. Take it away.
Just getting my screen share ready. Can everyone see it? Yeah, wave, thank you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to quickly reflect. I'm really excited about the CCWS personally. We will be using that data a lot in our work with campus health, and I really missed the NCHA when we stopped doing that. So this is an excellent it will definitely contribute to our work and certainly will contribute to our work in food security. So I'm Casey. I'm a campus health specialist at the UBC Okanagan campus, and I'm presenting alongside Kim and Marisa, who are incredible grad students that have been working alongside me for just over a year on this research project. We are representing from the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Syilx Okanagan people. And so I'm going to start off this presentation. I'm going to talk a little bit about voice and our methodological framework, some of our previous research related to food, and how surveys such as the CCWS have been important to our work at UBC Okanagan. So VOICE is a multi-phase research project which began in around 2007. In those early days, the research team was testing out the use of community-based participatory action research methods to address issues that impacted campus well-being. There was an intentional focus on partnering with students, with staff and faculty, and to use health promotion strategies to address the issues identified. Over phase 1 and 2, this approach proved to be effective at engaging the campus community, placing the student voice at the center, creating lasting partnerships, and collectively addressing a variety of issues identified to impact health and well-being. In 2013, the Voice 3 results indicated that food was rated as the #1 well-being priority area by respondents. Students shared that a variety of concerns related to affordability, food variety and quality, and more. At this point, household food insecurity was not really being discussed widely on campus, though there was some inkling by students anecdotally that this was an issue. In 2016, the research team launched Voice 4, a project that actually focused on mental well-being in campus environments. But the research team decided to include a food security question in order to get a better sense of the issue. The question we asked was taken from the household food insecurity module, and it was, in the past 12 months, have you worried that food would run out before you got money to buy more food? We managed to survey 40% of our student population, and of our respondents, 42.3% indicated that they experienced some level of household food insecurity. We ran a logistic regression analysis of the demographics from this study, and that revealed that females, those with a diverse ability, students living on campus, individuals self-reporting as belonging to a visible minority, and international students were more likely to experience food insecurity than other student groups. When adjusted for gender, years on campus, and living situation, students who reported experiencing 2 or more forms of marginalization were about 2.5 times more likely to be food insecure compared to their counterparts. Then in 2019, 2 separate institutional surveys were conducted with students, the UBC Undergraduate Experience Survey, and then also the Campus Community Wellbeing Survey. Coincidentally, they also indicated that for the Okanagan campus, 42.3% of our students experience household food insecurity. So in partnership with our institutional research office, we dug a bit deeper into the student experience data, and we found that household food insecure participants' grades were on average 4% lower than their food secure peers, 15% reported mental or physical health challenges, 25% shared they reduced their course load in order to afford tuition and cost of living, and that 18% indicated that they may need to abandon their studies altogether due to financial reasons. Informed by this and our previous Voice research, the Voice team then approached the campus community to begin Voice 5 with the intention to with the focus of addressing and investigating food security. So for this project, we focus not only on household food insecurity, but also food skills and the UBCO campus food system. In the design of this project, the team was intentional to include priorities arising out of various UBC strategic plans, including the Indigenous Strategic Plan, the Inclusion Action Plan, the Wellbeing Strategic Framework, and we also sought to uphold the calls to action in the Okanagan Charter. Marisa will take over.
Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Marisa. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what the current project looks like. For this project, we wanted to know what systemic factors were supporting and hindering household food insecurity, capacity, and the broader food system at UBCO. We wanted to give students an inclusive opportunity to speak about food insecurity and how it related to them. And we aimed to illustrate the student experience so that we could uncover the barriers that students are facing and begin to develop real solutions.
Just to start answering these questions, we put together a research plan. So we used a screening tool to determine which students have experienced or are currently experiencing household food insecurity, as well as to identify students in specific historically and systemically marginalized groups, which allowed us to place students in talks that would be most appropriate for them to participate in. This increased a sense of safety among tabletop participants. So we held 3 table talks. There was a general household food insecurity talk for any students who identified as household food insecure, a specific household food insecurity group as well for marginalized groups, capacity focused talks, which focused on the food and the food literacy, as well as food systems. Then to analyze our results, we used in vivo. Each table talk was transcribed and we developed a coding framework based on the key ideas and themes from the data. Our goal was to have a really rich description of the experiences of food security for our participants, which we would then use to identify priorities and develop recommendations and strategies for improving food security on our campus.
So now to go over the results. We hosted 12 mouthful table talks, and the breakdown for specific talks is shown on the right side of this slide.
Now we're going to go in a little bit into those demographics. So this slide's a really brief overview of just some of the demographic data that we collected for this study. The graph on the right shows the representation of marginalized folks that composed our table talk discussion groups. The data showed that multiple genders were represented, including transgender and non-binary folks. We also collected data on the workload that students were undertaking and found that some of our students were taking full course loads as well as working part-time or full-time jobs, which supported the students' discussion about time, academics, and finances. A little over half of the participants were receiving some sort of financial aid. While many of our students self-identified as household food insecure, only 4 reported accessing food assistance in the last year. Participants shared through our table talk that the reason for this is that accessing food assistance is associated with a lot of shame and stigma for many students.
So we broke our results down into 4 major themes that we'll be highlighting in today's presentation. The first 2 relate to how students are managing and are impacted by their food insecurity. We'll then discuss factors that exacerbate student food security in general, as well as campus-specific factors.
We wanted to understand a bit more about how students who were experiencing food insecurity were coping with and managing their situation. So we organized their management skills into 2 categories: budget-related coping and avoidant coping. Budget-related coping strategies were the more proactive methods like shopping sales and splitting costs with roommates, where more severely avoidant coping strategies involve students sleeping instead of eating and starving themselves, sometimes for days. Many students talked about how they would cope with the shame they felt for being food insecure by making jokes or downplaying the severity of their situations amongst their friends.
Food insecurity has negative effects on virtually every aspect of students' lives. In terms of physical health, students felt an overall lack of energy and struggled to stay focused on daily tasks. Students reported physical body changes such as weight gain and loss, as well as loss of muscle, and felt that previous physical health conditions were exacerbated by their experience. Students' academics were also affected. They reported sleeping through classes and important deadlines due to extreme lethargy and lacking energy to pay attention in class or retain information. In some cases, students needed to reduce their entire course load or take additional years of school due to related mental health or financial issues. Additionally, students' mental wellness was affected. They experienced mood swings and felt an exacerbation of pre-existing mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression. They experienced additional food-related stress, worry, and shame. And lastly, students' social well-being was impacted. Students felt isolated due to busy scheduling and from not being able to attend events with friends due to lack of funds.
So as many of us know, the research shows that poverty is the cause of household food insecurity. Students shared a variety of those factors that they believe exacerbates their experience of being household food insecure. Many of these factors are similar to those that we see within the general population who are food insecure, such as struggles with financial planning, time management, cooking, and cleaning. However, students also shared additional things that exacerbated their experience, such as classes, homework, extracurriculars, post-grad planning, and other things that were contributing to the students' 24/7 lifestyle.
So now I'm just going to further explore these factors. The 7 factors depicted on this slide are the main themes that students referred to as factors that exacerbate their food insecurity. Students said that parents, professors, and peers perpetuate the starving student stereotype. Cultural barriers such as this one prevent students from seeking aid in times of need due to their impression that being starving is just a rite of passage for students. Students feel there is stigma associated with being food insecure, and many feel it would be shameful to ask for help. Students shared how systemic, historical, and current marginalization contributes to their food insecurity. Our Indigenous and 2S LGBTQIA+ students reported discomfort in food environments outside of their respective resource centers. Indigenous and international students reported a lack of access to culturally safe foods. Disabled students reported difficulties navigating food systems and spoke about how systemic shaming and prejudice of students with disabilities hinders students in seeking resources. Students are aware that food insecurity is a symptom of poverty. Students referred to a list of typical costs, including housing, food, cars and insurance, parking, etc., in addition to ever-increasing tuition prices and textbooks. While some students work jobs to manage these costs, many students said they were unable to work during the school year because of their school-related workload. Students said that the abundance of schoolwork assigned to them can lead to a 24-hour student lifestyle and found that their academics and extracurriculars related to this take up most of the available time in the day. Many students reported school as their #1 priority and fear failure if they do not prioritize it. These students spoke of deep-rooted systemic pressures to do well at all costs. Students noted the highly competitive environment that university is today and how this leads to extreme resume building. Students spoke about how the university institution as a whole doesn't care whether their physical, mental, or social well-being is failing. All that matters is good grades and competitive experience. Between all of these intersecting factors, students reported an extreme time poverty. Between school-related work and extracurriculars, the need to work full or part-time jobs, and making time for family, students consistently reported lacking any time for food. Many students go to bed hungry or eat non-nutritious, easy meals as a result. Students reminded us that they are going through a transitional period in their lives, and most reported having a lack of functional skills upon entering university, putting them in a vulnerable position. Students did not know how to cook, clean, and most importantly, manage their finances and their time. Students reported the difficulties they have had in trying to navigate not only university, extracurriculars, and work, but also just how to function as an independent individual for the first time in their lives. Students recognize all of these factors as intersecting and influencing each other to create student food insecurity.
Students also spoke about UBCO and how the university itself has an influence on student food security. Students reported that the price of food on campus is disproportionate to portion sizes. In terms of food quality, students found that while recent years have shown an increase in quality and healthy options, the only cheap meals available are heavily weighted towards carbohydrates like rice and pasta and are not nutritious. Students who lived on campus with a mandatory meal plan were especially affected by the food available. While most dorms had communal kitchens, students reported not using them as a result of them being unkept and food going missing. Students also expressed difficulty managing their meal plans and budgeting accordingly. Some ran out of money, while those who didn't expressed distress that the university does not offer full reimbursements for leftover meal plan money at the end of the year. Students reported an overall lack of space on campus, leading to long lines to purchase food and nowhere to sit. Students noted that there were no cooking facilities, no grocery store, a lack of places to store their food, and a lack of microwaves, all of which combined with a geographically secluded campus contributed to students going without food during the days. To combat these issues, some suggestions from students included buffet-style dining, early and late night food options to accommodate that 24/7 lifestyle that they spoke about, optional meal plans, cooking equipment available in dorms, increased food storage and microwaves, and an on-campus grocery store. Additionally, students discussed their interest in a food hub style place where students could prepare meals amongst friends and club members, learn new skills, and prepare healthy and affordable food.
Students feel that there is a lack of community felt on campus, and specifically a lack of opportunity to build friendships and a lack of spaces that could potentially aid in fostering community aspects of food. International students specifically spoke about the community building components of food and how food is central to social activities in many cultures, whereas it is more of a monetary transaction in Canada. International students and Indigenous students noted how the amount of cultural foods on campus is disproportionate to student representation. Students with dietary restrictions felt similarly. Disabled students reported issues with the physical accessibility of our campus and difficulties navigating food environments. Students noted resource centers as inclusive spaces, but also said that UBCO should be aware of the inclusivity in all of their spaces. Finally, students expressed great appreciation to all student clubs doing important work on food security on campus. Students would like to see more resources provided to these student initiatives. Other suggestions from students included discounting group purchases, group cooking nights and programming, a communication platform to talk with other students about foods and struggles, better seating arrangements and a seating invite system, and the integration of cultural spaces into the overall physical environment of UBCO. Students emphasized the need for a cooking and gathering space for fostering community and inclusivity.
Students are facing a plethora of barriers when it comes to food security, and while they are managing it in some aspects, it's important to acknowledge that the root of food insecurity is poverty. Although students are working hard to make the best of bad situations, their lack of food security is still having a detrimental effect on their mental and physical health, their social well-being, and academic success. From an institutional perspective, hungry students who are struggling in all aspects of well-being are not engaged in optimal learning environments and are unable to reach their full potential. Our presentation today serves to illustrate the dire realities of student food insecurity experienced by 42.3% of our students, which is in line with national averages at other institutions. These circumstances require transformation at the institutional and societal levels. Students know what they need. They've always known, and it's time that we listen and give students the tools that they need to be successful.
We wanted to leave you with a quote from a student at one of our food insecurity talks. This student said that starving student is still coded language for being poor and that we still aren't talking about being poor yet. The student said, so if we really want to be honest about what this is about, it's about trying to make campuses accessible to people inclusively. We've equated money with deservingness. So if you're somebody who's going to wear your poverty, that means you're taking the risk of being seen as not deserving to be here at university, and that's literally what it is. It's the most shameful thing in our society. We would like to take this moment to send a big thank you to everyone on our research and advisory teams, and also thank you to everyone who is listening here today. We look forward to answering any questions you might have during our discussion time.
Wow, thank you so much, Casey, Marisa, and Kim. That's such an important, so much important information there, from the research methods used to the findings, and that 40% statistic is continuously shocking. So thank you so much for all of that. And I look forward to questions. So next we welcome Dr. Leslie Frank, who is Acadia's University's new Canada Research Chair in Food, Health, and Social Justice, and professor in the Department of Sociology. She researches in the areas of family poverty and food insecurity, particularly related to families, early childhood, and student food insecurity.
Thank you. I'm zooming in from the territory of the Mi'kmaq, and I'm on the other side of Turtle Island. So for many of you, thanks for having me. That last presentation was so comprehensive that I'm not sure I have a lot more to add in terms of insights, but I can share some history, I think, around this topic and research in Canada. And for me, it began at a meeting of the Canadian Association of Food Studies at a conference in 2014. I was listening to a presentation by Dr. Elaine Power, who I'm sure many of you know, and the presentation was called, "I Didn't Feel Like I Needed to Drop Out Anymore." And it was about students' experiences about using the food bank at Queen's University. And there was staff from Meal Exchange in the audience, and they asked the researchers in the room why there was no prevalence studies on student food insecurity in Canada. And would any of us be willing to turn our attention to this? To that point, there had only been a couple of published studies coming out of the University of Alberta under the work of Dr. Noreen Willows, who I'm sure many of you know as well. But there was no prevalence studies, and meaning that they weren't aiming to capture the extent of the problem within certain populations. So yes, Meal Exchange sort of guilted us, and it worked, and we organized, they organized us to get to work on collaborating on a survey design. And this tool was rolled out in the winter of 2015 at the University of Saskatchewan and at my university at Acadia. And since that time, I'm not even sharing my screen, am I? Okay, am I? No, okay. Take a second, that's fine. Can you see it now? Yeah, okay, perfect. So since that time, look what happened. Other spontaneous and rapid work started being done across the country. These are just some of the published studies. And a lot of this work was sort of done with graduate students. And I'd like a shout out to graduate students by putting this issue on the forefront of research. I believe there's probably much more unpublished research that looked at prevalence that we've just heard about too, right? And probably hear some more about today. And of course, we know that Mail Exchange also coordinated 5 prevalence studies across the country. So data was rolling out. There was also quite a lot of media attention around these studies as they came out. Now, I probably don't need to describe this because, across these studies, that were measuring the prevalence of food insecurity, the tools vary, of course. So the sampling technique varies, the analysis approaches vary, the research questions will vary. And one positive things are researchers are coming from a number of perspectives. So we have researchers in community health and nutrition and dietetics and sociology, just to name probably a few. And they're usually what students are being asked, there's some combination of the 10-item household food security module from the Canadian Community Health Survey, as was already mentioned by Guy. And they're asked things from indicators of marginal food insecurity, which are, I worried whether my food would run out before I got money to buy more, for example, to indicators that capture severe food insecurity for not able to eat for a whole day or more because there wasn't enough money for food. Just if people are curious what kinds of questions are asked. And what we know from the published research and from some unpublished research is that the rates are ranging from 29% to 46%. So that's like more than 1 in 3 students are being captured in those prevalent studies as being food insecure of some category, depending on the way that the researchers are, if they're using all the classifications. And we know also that rates vary by groups of students, and they're higher for international students, rates are higher for Indigenous students, graduate students, racialized students, students that are working, those receiving student loans. And so that's pretty consistent across the studies. And some studies measure outcomes as well, as we've heard. So not just prevalence. And we know that food insecurity is linked to poor self-reported health outcomes, higher levels of daily stress, poor physical health outcomes, and poor academic performances, and usually measured in terms of grades. Okay, so I also just wanted to say there's also a growing amount of research on how food insecurity is experienced by post-secondary students, also being spearheaded by a number of students. And we heard from the previous speakers kind of the nature of what that's like in this student group. So I don't think I really need to go into the details of that. We're fairly familiar of how it rolls out in this population. That is particular. I just want to say there are particular things about the student experience where that they experience this differently. And as a final note, I just want to say, we know that this is not because of the causes of food insecurity are not food issues, or the failing of inexperienced people in learning how to feed themselves. The causes are rooted in income, but that was previously mentioned again. So I'll just leave it at that. It was supposed to be rapid 5 minutes, and I probably went over.
Thank you, Leslie. That was important and really great. And yeah, I loved what you finished on there, and also highlighting how important the collaboration is between university and students and Meal Exchange and other organizations. And we'll definitely get into that a bit later. So thank you. Okay. Next, we welcome Akia Ajaman, who is a Master of Sustainability Studies student at Trent University. Her research interests include food, racism, and justice. So go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah, for the introduction, and I'm excited to share my ongoing research to everyone on here on this platform. I'll begin to share my screen. Okay, so the largest study of campuses across Canada to date found that nearly 40% of Canadian university students struggle with food insecurity. So in spite of the difficulty in explaining food security, current conceptualization looks at two important aspects, which is access and sufficiency. I think I have a problem with my PowerPoint, but that's okay, I'll just go ahead. So in spite of the difficulty in explaining food insecurity, current conceptualization looks at two important aspects, which is access and sufficiency. Looking at the title of my research work, that is Food Insecurity Among Racialized International Students, I am very interested in looking at the cultural aspects of food. Now, food insecurity experiences goes beyond food quantity and transcends culture. So though culture strongly influences food and eating, not so much is known about the interaction between culture and racialized international students' food insecurity. Access to quality, nutritious, affordable, and culturally appropriate food constitutes a clear and presents a challenge with serious academic and classroom consequences, though remains an edge in their need to fight food insecurity among racialized international students. And in Canada, Black people face insecurity 3.5 times than that of white households. We have a good reason to believe that the rates of food insecurity among racialized international students are much higher. So my study will respond to the urgent need to better understand the experiences of racialized international students in Canada who are food insecure by examining the structures and policy elements that result in food insecurity, and also documents the lived experiences of food insecure racialized international students at both Trent University and that of University of Toronto. I focus specifically on these two schools in order to be able to compare and contrast students' experiences on campuses within highly urban and more rural settings. So the study will situate racialized international students' food insecurity within two discrete but overlapping conceptual frameworks. I name one to be neoliberal university, which is the neoliberalization of post-secondary education in Canada. And then the second talks about race and food. Let's go on to talk about the neoliberal university. Now, international education and the global flow of tertiary students is on the rise as the world is interconnected more than ever. Studying is an exciting goal for many international students, and I am one of them. And I would say that the first day I received my admission letter, I was jumping all over in the room, so much excited. I couldn't sleep. I was overjoyed because I gained admission to study abroad. And a report from UNESCO states that about 3.7 million students were studying outside their home country in 2009, and they predicted that the number of foreign students might rise to approximately 6.4 million by 2025. We can anticipate that given that the average international undergraduate student fees at $24,000 for the year 2016 and 2017, that is like 4 times the rate of domestic tuition fees, and it keeps increasing every other year. I believe that no longer is education associated with an intrinsic value, but instead it has been reconceptualized as a commodity that a student purchases for his or her own gain. Neoliberal policies has effectively transformed students within higher education from students to consumers. These exorbitant fees compound various other marginalizations international students face with respect to adjusting to a new country, culture, and university experience. With rising tuition fees, affording food becomes a major obstacle for many international students. We can go on and talk about the second point that talks about race and food. As an immigrant in Canada for the first time, I am one among many who acknowledges appealing and diverse cultures. I understand how assimilating into another culture is difficult. I use my personal experiences for this because I feel like I'm an insider and also an outsider in this research. I'll say that when I got here before, I had to go through a lot of adjustment challenges. It was like a big culture shock to me. The weather change, currency differences, homesickness, and all the kind of things that you have to go through. Every other thing I buy, I had to convert it into my currency and know how the differences and all. And in my country, we've never experienced like a weather of 20 degrees Celsius ever. It doesn't go down other than that. So it was actually new. I could pack up and still feel cold. So tracing the path through the tremendous literature on racialization, we can see that racialization and food systems change are not separate issues. Food has undeniable emotional and cultural attachments, which from my own experience are acutely experienced among racialized international students. And we know that Ontario draws different students across the world with different cultural backgrounds and then religions. Due to this, international students are known to have diverse food patterns and often stick to their preferred traditional foods, which again could be a way of retaining their cultural identity. I would say that the lack of access to familiar and culturally appropriate food may have a dramatic effect on academic outcomes. I will put myself in here again. When I came before, I couldn't really concentrate in class, not because there was food shortage or I didn't have money to buy food, but because I couldn't have the culturally preferred food that I wanted. And then again, a lot of definitions of food insecurity has been around talking about being the access to food, the shortages of food and all, but I'm looking at the cultural aspects, trying to find a familiar and culturally appropriate food. And some studies have found a correlation between GPA and food insecurity. And they say that those who had a 3.1 GPA or higher were 60% less likely to suffer from food insecurity. I'm hopeful that my research raises awareness and advocates for policy change that will further reduce the barriers to food security among the international students community on university campus. I know this is an ongoing debate that I wish to hear more about. We just have just 5 minutes, and I'm hopeful that there are more insights from each and every one of you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kia. That was an amazing presentation. And yeah, it's obviously so crucial, the work that you're doing, as nothing is yet really known or researched about racialized international students and food security. So thank you so much for both doing that work and presenting it to us today. Next, we welcome Lara Castrillon-Violante, a PhD candidate in the Interdisciplinary Studies graduate program and the Institute for Resource, Environment, and Sustainability at UBC. Lara's research focuses on the constitutional right to food and the knowledge gap using legislation, litigation, and public policy global data. You can go ahead. Oh, I wonder if you're
now.
Oh, now I can hear you. Yeah, that's great.
Hello. Hello. Yes.
Hi.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Okay. Okay. Yes. Can you hear me this time? Okay.
Your internet is cutting out
Perfect.
just a tiny little bit.
Okay. Please let me know. I will start, but please let me know if I should go back a little bit. So I have 5 minutes window to tell you about my research. So I will cut to the chase and openly disclose that, well, I will try to convince you to tackle food insecurity with a right-based approach within the higher education and beyond. My PhD is in process, and I don't have any final results to discuss with you today. Stay tuned though. However, I would like to use this space to briefly comment on what my research is about, and then focus the rest of these presentations to share some of what I have been learning in this process. To summarize my PhD, I can say that today, 30 countries have explicitly recognized the right to food in their constitutions. The potential of the human right to food to achieve just, sustainable, healthy, and culturally appropriate food has been widely discussed in academia and beyond. However, there is scarcely empirical research analyzing the repercussions of the right to food beyond this recognition. My research focused on this knowledge gap using what Sarah mentioned before, legislation, litigation, and policy. And I use mainly qualitative methodology, although I also use sometimes mixed methods, but mainly qualitative. So now the convincing part. Let me attempt to answer the question why. Well, a very simple.
Laura, your internet is cutting out just a bit. I think maybe let's just...
Everything humanity has. Hello, hi, can you hear me?
It's in and out, but now I can hear you. So maybe if you can rewind just 30 seconds.
Or thank you that why it is it's important to tackle food insecurity through human rights. And the simple answer is we need it all, really. We need the solution, we need the inspiration.
Laura, I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
Affecting the corporations. Therefore, we are from principles. Yes.
I wonder if you can maybe you can turn off your video so we can hear your audio a bit more clearly.
Yes, that's I will. Yeah, let me do that.
Yeah, we definitely want to be able to hear what you're saying. Okay.
So can you hear me right now?
Yeah, that's way better. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. So I think we really need human rights because they function as guiding principles for more just societies, and they serve as limit to the abuse of power. So really we need them all. A more precise answer is, while human rights are not 100% effective, I mean, what is right 100% effective at all? But human rights are a well-recognized institution with undeniable achievements, including human rights to vote, the abolition of slavery, the decline of deaths in war and conflict, and the advancement of rights recognition in indigenous people, people with disabilities, and the LGBT community. Another thing that is important to have in mind when assessing human rights is that they tend to be compared with the ideal scenario, when in fact they should be more fairly compared with the existing scenario before human rights were upheld. I would only add to this that in the meantime, we come with something better than the rule of law to organize us a society. It would be irresponsible not to call on human rights along with everything we have at hand to solve the food and the health crisis and all this mess that we have created to ourselves and the planet. So now I want to talk to you a little bit more about the specific human rights. There are different human rights that offer a most needed approach to the advancement of food security. The human right to health, water and sanitation, to housing, to a healthy environment, just to mention some of them. But one that is absolutely essential is the human right to food. I won't go much into detail, but this is important to mention because human rights have this interdependent nature. If one becomes stronger, the other human rights will benefit. If one is lessened, the others will deteriorate. And this is another argument that supports why a human rights approach is a way to go. So back to the right to food, this human right was included in the 1948 Declaration of Human Rights, and it is recognized under international law by Canada since 1976, when along with other 170 countries ratified the International Covenant of Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. As a consequence, Canada and the rest of these state parties are legally bound to respect, protect, and fulfill this right. So the right to food is one that recognizes that the act of nourishing ourselves is a basic need, and therefore it's a human right. In our context, this means that all of us, we have the right to have access to income, to social safety nets, in order to choose the food that we deem best to nurture ourselves, the community, and the planet. In practical terms, this would mean that to tackle food insecurity with the right to food approach, we really need to recognize the following. Number one, the right to food principles and priorities. This is the egalitarian and non-discrimination principles, putting people and planet first, and profit and political gain second, third, or fourth, or not even there. Then food is an entitlement, and the state is the primary duty bearer. In practical terms, it means that food is not a favor. It's not a gesture of assistance that depend on goodwill or even corporate agenda, but it is a certainty rooted in the law and backed by the state apparatus. And with entitlement, it comes the beauty of accountability and access to remedy. The right to food gives us the legal grounds to demand public accountability when any branch of government is not protecting, respecting, or fulfilling the right to food. And to demand justice when government or any entity, and I'm looking to you, transnational corporations, are violating our rights to food and human rights, specifically our right to food. So food insecurity efforts will also need to recognize participatory rights in the decision-making process, which led to a virtuous cycle of empowerment and food literacy. Acknowledging that we are not passive consumers or whatever the global food system imposes on us, but active participants, really agents of change. The last thing in this regard is transparency and access to information. This is why food insecurity data should be accessible, public, and disaggregated by gender, age, income, ethnicity, and hold the palette needed to better understand the complexities of food insecurity, and also to monitor and evaluate food insecurity policies and programs. I cannot pass this opportunity to denounce the unacceptable decision of the BC Provincial Health Services Authority to opt out to the 2019-2020 Canadian Community Health Survey of food insecurity, making BC the only province that opted out and decided not to participate. As a final remark, I would like to inspire you all. Food insecurity on higher education, it's really a big challenge. But we can use this right-based approach as a tool to leverage our strength and as an education institution. We are all part of really top of the world research institutions committed to challenge the status quo and to reshape the world for the better. Imagine if we came up with a data-driven evidence and rights-based pilot program that would end food insecurity on our campuses, and the potential ripple effect if we came up with this within our societies and even the world. It won't be easy. Food insecurity, as you know, is one of the most complex issues humans faces today, now exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. But we are academic institutions. We have the capability and the community to thrive in these challenges. If we cannot really tackle this, then who? Thank you very much.
Wow, Laura, thank you so much. Yeah, it's so important to be talking about human rights and food in one conversation. I'm so happy we got to hear you in the end after those technical difficulties. So yeah, thank you so much. So lastly, I'd like to welcome Wilson Mendes, an Indigenous Afro-Brazilian community planner, anti-colonial land-based scholar, and visual artist living on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Wilson's research focuses on Indigenous land-based pedagogies and Indigenous food sovereignty for urban and Indigenous youth. Thank you. Wilson, you're still muted, I think. Oh, for some reason.
Okay,
There.
how's that? Is that good?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Awesome. Let me just get this. My presentation ready to go here. And so, hello, everybody. Wilson here. Grateful to be invited to be part of this conversation. Is due to my heart. Food is what keep us alive and connect with the land and waterways with each other. So, and being in an institution for the past 15 years, I thought a lot about my connection to food and how that influences my learning. And so today, however, I would like to share with you some of the work I've been involved with as a group of researchers at one of the initiatives at the UBC farm to contextualize, bringing some examples of what the University of British Columbia and in some of their projects are actually doing to bringing the conversation of food, connection to land and culture together, and so, yeah, I'm hoping that this presentation will provide some food for thought in terms of how we can actually engage students in actually addressing policies and planning related to food within higher education, as opposed to us, most of it as researchers to actually decide, for them. So how can we actually make room for students to be part of the transformation and the policies that needs to be in place so that we minimize some of this trouble of food insecurity within higher education. And so before I move into this, I just want to acknowledge that I'm speaking with you today from this beautiful land and waterways of the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam people, the Halkamenan speaking people here in Coast Salish lands. I also know here Vancouver. I live very close to campus. And so my research, my current PhD research is on land-based pedagogies and how that intersects with Indigenous food sovereignty and food security for Indigenous, urban Indigenous youth in the city. However, for this presentation, I'm going to bring the land-based community action research that we are doing in terms of the garden, the Watsitsam Garden, for the past 13 years, to bring conversations about food, culture, community together in an array of players, from faculty members to university students to nonprofit organizations, to community, urban Indigenous communities and non-Indigenous folks interested in food. You know that land, we cannot talk about food without talking about land, and we cannot talk about land without addressing the ramifications and the ongoing processes of colonization that has impacted our ability to actually provide for ourselves. So it's all interconnected. However, again, there's a lot of slides in here. I'm hoping that kind of bring a little bit of imagery about the engagement processes we've been doing at the UBC farm in terms of bringing that conversation about food, community, and health together. And so for folks across this beautiful Turtle Island, also known as Canada, UBC is located over here on this tipping point on this beautiful unceded tradition of the Musqueam folks. If you haven't come to this part of the country, please do. It's beautiful here. And I'm sure it's beautiful where you are as well. So here, there are three, the UBC farm, so which also knows the Center for Sustainable Food Systems. There is an indigenous initiative in there in place. And there are essentially three programs that are running indigenous land-based teachings and learning. One of them is the Tuwash project, the Mayan Garden, and then the Watsitsam. The Watsitsam is the one that I'd like to present to you today, because that's the place I've been working for the past 5 years as in different capacities, and that's where I did end up doing my research on the final leg of it. And let's move on. So to begin with, this is the space. You could, the design of the garden has been a consultation an extensive consultation with the UBC community, also the communities, urban communities, to decide how we're going to create a space that inclusive of the Musqueam culture, and also bringing a design on the land to honor the local culture, but also break away from traditional Western agricultural straight lines kind of food production. So the design is spinning wheels, and it represents some of the spinning wheels of the Musqueam folks. And so the garden itself, it engages in 4 quadrants in terms of this land-based pedagogies. We tackled education, research, community building, in a way of, I guess, providing learning spaces for people to connect with one another, and also engage in conversation about food and empowerment. So our work is centered on indigenous protocols, processes, ontologies, epistemologies, and ways of knowing. The space it's an indigenous-led. We have a body of elders working with us, supporting the work and providing us with directions of how to interact with the community when they come to this space, and also the elders who actually spend time with our visitants when they come in to support on their learning. And essentially the garden, it serves a multi-level of educational spaces, because it provides a different way of understanding and connecting with land, connecting with food. And the garden itself, as in my title there, we acknowledge it, land as the teacher, earth as our teacher, and food as medicine. Have a different approach to it, that food is something that we not only consume, it becoming us, but we needed to have a relationship with it. So in our teachings, the pedagogy is around this idea of relationality, how we relate to one another beyond the human race, that we are alive support to one another. And so that has an impact in the students who are coming to the space. A lot of it we do, we receive over the years. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we haven't been able to engage the community as we have had in the past for the past 12 years. But every year we receive over 1,500 people come to this space. And a lot of it comes from UBC students, faculties, and the community, outside in the urban space. So is that interaction, is that interactive, I guess, space that creates this learning environment, this cross-cultural conversation that happened. And so I'm going to go through some of the photos here just to show a little bit of our engagement process, to talk a little bit about that, food as medicine, and how we can relate it to one another in a way that is collective, and understanding that we needed to be part of our food system by making decisions. We need to be part of the decision-making process, so we can then start addressing the needs of our particular communities, and also interact and bring in our culture, because food is culture and community. We cannot dissociate that. And that's the conversation that we actually contribute quite a lot within this higher education food security dialogue, when students are coming in or faculties are coming into the space, we have conversation about what does it look like, a space where we can actually take practice into the land, like the theoretical stuff that we learn in our classroom into the land, because we can only learn, I guess we can start, we are able to learn about our food struggles in the classroom, but it's better yet when you're on the land, and supported by knowledge keepers. So within our engagement process is a multi-generational, intergenerational approach. We bring little ones to older ones to come together and support one another and have conversations about, this connection to land, to food, to health and wellness. Within this engagement process, we also provide the space for that creativity to come along, this interactivity that we, this curriculum almost that we have developed on the space land-based curriculum that brings people closer to their food sources, or that relationship to that food or their medicine that they use every day. And so we provide a space for learning, whether it is by planting, by harvesting, by being community, by talking about the various levels of a food systems, that we needed to be engaged with because we are all part of it. And on top of all of this conversation that we have, the surface of it is, is decoloniality, as to addressing some of the issues that we are facing in our everyday life for not accessing our culturally relevant food, and figuring out ways in which we can support each other to kind of create that relationship and connectivity to kind of support our needs and our community needs in terms of food, health, and wellness. So one of our projects, activities that we have in the garden is not only the participants came to the space to learn and to discuss, to engage in conversations about food systems, discourse and dialogue, but also get them to practice it, to live it, to smell it, to feel it in their spaces, so they have a different understanding and relationship with the food when they go home. They relate it to that. They can actually articulate their needs for that health and wellness that comes through food. So what we do after, in the middle of the season, we usually harvest this medicine and the food. We put workshops that we bring communities together, and a lot of the folks on the page here, there are interns, UBC interns that work with us, students who actually wanted to engage in the food system, wanted to engage in learning more about the land, culture, and they come in the space and then interact with these various levels of knowledge keepers in a way that, foster also their sense of identity and connection to land and in connection with their own health and wellness. And so here is one of our workshops, the medicine making. This is a kind of the product or the work that at the end, what comes out of that. We harvest our medicine, we produce medicine, and that medicine goes back to the community. The students, they learn about it, they participate in the workshops in the community, then outside the urban community, end up receiving this medicine in here as an act of reciprocity, because we all learn from each other. In a way, a lot of the elders from some of the urban indigenous communities also come into the space to support us with their teachings in terms of medicine. Another aspect of it, here in the West Coast, salmon, so important to us. They're here swimming on my background. We have a smoke shed in there. We smoke our fish. We teach our youth, our participants how to do that. We talk about the importance of salmon as an important source of connection and food for communities on the coast. And an ecological species that support our forests and waterways. So that conversation is rich, and that space holds this cultural exchange and teachings. we also grow a lot of medicines in terms of tobacco. Here are some of the youth tying some tobacco leaves. We grow those tobacco to also be giving back to the communities who actually use the tobacco for ceremonies. And the idea here is also the education around demystifying and engaging with the practice of growing tobacco, and then also the misunderstanding about some of those medicines. And I think that's all for you for now. And this is me, Harry Plotter here. People took some but anyways, I appreciate the time, and I hope this presentation can help you in some way so we can have more conversation about this wonderful day we're having together here and listen to other participants with so much good things to say. Well, my relations, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Wilson. I loved when you said that we can't talk about food without talking about land, and we can't talk about land without talking about ongoing colonization. And yeah, it was just an incredible presentation and gorgeous photos, really so beautiful. So thank you. So yeah, I know that the other Sarah wrote in the chat that we're going to stay on for about 10 more minutes and have kind of a rapid fire discussion with everyone that presented today, and then we'll wrap up. So if you want to stay on, that would be great. So I'll put this question out to everyone that spoke today, and whoever has something to say, you can just chime in, and we'll take maybe about 30 seconds each to answer it so you can hear a broad range of perspectives. So the question is, what are some of the critical gaps in food security research within campus environments that should be addressed over the next few years collectively? So yeah, whoever wants to chime in, try to take about 30 seconds and say the top priority.
I'll go. Thinking about household food insecurity, I think we all know it boils down to income, and I'd like to have more information about students' income. I want to hear more about that, what that whole picture looks like, where they're getting their funding, how are they supported or not, and comparing that to cost of living, and really starting to put those clear numbers out there with a very clear call to action with policy change.
Yeah, I'll jump in because I agree. And I mean, you could do some food costing research on a student affordability scenario for post-secondary education. What's really challenging is getting the information from student loan, and each province different. So there'll be a challenge there. But one of the things that I would say is I do think we need national prevalence data, which this survey that Guy is talking about, if it could get rolled out in a sort of comprehensive way, could perhaps solve. But I also think we need to make data available to people to use, and it's not easily accessible food security data. That's all I wanted to add.
Yes, I would like to second everything that what has been said here. I think the elephant in the room is income and poverty, and it has been very clearly stated that this is one of the main things that it can be considered at this point for sure a gap. And we have wonderful examples that of researches that has been here explained. I would only share with our audience that there's also work from Valerie Terrazzo, Graham Riches, Yang Xia, Paul, and Paul Taylor, and many, many more that have been very vocal that food insecurity challenge in this context are very mainly related with poverty. And in this regard, I would love to see some communication with the BC government. I mean, in BC, there is a poverty reduction strategy, and this strategy is examining ways to strengthen financial security. So I would love to have more conversation among campuses and universities with our government.
I just gonna jump in. I think to address it's a difficult question, and I think one way to kind of enter that dialogue and dive in is to the development of alternative curriculum, decolonial curriculum within food systems, because we can't solve this problem within the same way we cause it. Colonization is, has caused a dramatic and terrible, play a terrible part in this. And then, so if for universities to move forward with whatever is food sovereignty or indigenous food sovereignty or food security, we need to start thinking about, rethinking the way we address it from a decolonial point of view. And then I think that's the challenge. So how are we going to do that without actually have access to land? Theory and practice, you can learn in the classroom, then what? Where are you going to apply that? There needs to be some of that aspect, to actually have students to come forward and share their experiences, field experience within that food system dialogue. And yeah.
I'd like to add something. Well, I've been to some conferences that talks about student food insecurity, and you could see that most of the comments from people say that most of the institutions are actually not ready for a real life change. So it's more of the responsibility of the students to find solutions to their problems, unfortunately. And looking at the explanations of food insecurity, we seem to ignore or neglect the cultural food aspect. And that's just a problem, because there have been a lot of ways that we have addressed food insecurity by the creation of food banks, pantries, but there's still the problem of food insecurity on campuses. So what are we supposed to do? What is going on? So what we need to actually think about is not all about the income aspect, because people can actually have money, but can't actually find what suits their preference. So it can make them hungry, or it can make them not concentrate in class, because you actually have to think of either eating healthy or going to school. It becomes an option for you to choose between something like that. So I think it's we also have to now neglect the part of thinking that it's the responsibility of institutions or people in high places to come in to help, but I think it's the responsibility of ourselves to get into place and do things for ourselves to help ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Such a wide range of responses, from collecting more data and research to then also actually changing the way that we do research and the way that we have action and implement action in the institution. So there's a lot to think about there. Thank you. I think that I'll ask one more question and we'll do another kind of rapid round of answers. If everyone's okay with that, maybe I can get a thumbs up or thumbs down from the, okay, I see one thumb up. Okay, cool. Okay, great. So we'll ask one more question and then we'll wrap up. So the question is, how can we best leverage the research that we do have to create change in higher education and beyond? And the research can be any type of research or knowledge that you're working with.
I'll go again first. I don't think I really have a good answer, but to me, it's like we have a lot of research and we know a lot of the answers already. So and we are starting to use it. I think that's like, at least at UBCO, we're starting to use that research to take some action. So I think just more people need to act on it and start to share the actions that they're taking, and maybe like this idea of building a network of what everybody's up to. Power in numbers.
Yes, I agree. Oh, Leslie, go. You're muted there.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say something similar again. I mean, the evidence is before us. What's so shocking to me is that everybody's saying the same things, right? So we do more qualitative research, but the results say the same things. There's something I think that needs to happen more locally. Yes, people are starting to use the information. For example, food insecurity is now a component of our campus food policy plan, along with other elements around cultural access to foods and fair trade, buying local. I mean, it's on the agenda, but it needs to be monitored. And so, and we need to have some benchmarks around it. So I think that's what I meant about access to localized data is important. And when people have access to data, they actually use it. And a parallel example would be, I write a report yearly in the province, the Nova Scotia Child Poverty Report Card, which is where I'm trying to get localized data. And it's only since I started reporting at the local level that community groups, that's where I start to see the movement. It's amongst the people that have data about themselves that are trying to make change with it. Because trying to convince government with that data has not worked in 20 years, and I've been doing it for 20 years. So I see this other sort of movement from below. And this actually was somebody was said something about the sharing space of students. And it made me think about that the student union building on our campus used to be a place where students would come and eat their own foods with microwaves, and now it's like a desert. So I think that it's just interesting to think about who has access to space on campus and whose space is it and what they can do with whose food, right? So comes back to the decolonizing question, I guess, a bit too. I'll just leave it at that.
Yes, I completely agree with everything that has been said. And it's, as you all mentioned, I mean, we have data, we have resources. I think it's about political will, and political will is really moved by our voices. So we need to cry out loud. We need to organize ourselves. We need to put certain metrics and then comply by them. So I think we can take this as an invitation to create, more networks around these topics and start to cry out loud and for our voices to even heard beyond these kind of forums. Thank you.
Anybody else want to add anything? Not to put you on the spot, you don't have to if you don't want to.
Can I say one last thing?
You can.
I just wanted, it's like household food insecurity, income, right? Like emergency. We want to create these experiences for students, like foster an environment for students where they're not in that emergency mode of operating, and they are out, a lot of students are out on their own for the first time and learning who they are and learning how to live, and connecting that back to like a positive association with food, and building on like what Ccws was saying, like building on culture, having those really nourishing, nurturing community building experiences, and the work that Wilson's doing in the garden. Like these are the kinds of things that I think really nurture and build, student well-being, and just kind of doing what we can to create more of that for them while we're working to collectively on these larger systemic issues to support them in their emergency.
Yeah, great points, everyone. I think from that conversation, it seems like everyone's in agreement that we have the research we need to show us what we need to be doing right now. And so we need to be doing it. And I saw in the chat that somebody wrote, we need to normalize mobilizing. And that I really like the ring of that. So thank you for sharing that with us. So if no one has anything else to add about that point, about that question, then we can just move on to the conclusion of our session.
I just want to add something to that. I think it's like, for me, this key debate regarding whether or not we can tackle food insecurity within higher education. I think the achievement of that relies on the challenge of the linear food production, distribution, and consumption model, or whether it can be, realized by addressing the structural causes of coloniality, climate change, capitalism, racism within the institution. So those things are complex, and then, I mean, there are a multitude of factors playing into this, and it's so hard to isolate. You can't isolate it. The food grows on the land. The land needs water, like the food needs water. So the complexity of it it's huge. But then, anyways, I just think the unstructured, like poverty, racism, inequality. I mean, there's all part of the problem that plays within institutions, wealthy institutions, colonial institutions that teach us to move and represent and interact with the world in a certain way. And so that needs to be challenged for us to have like a more wholesome wellness result to this.
Yeah, thank you, Elson. Those are really good points and questions to raise. And yeah, we need to start thinking about undoing the systems that have caused these problems, and maybe not working within them in the ways that we're used to. So thank you. So clearly we can see that food security is a growing priority for institutions and research, but also for everyone, and that we need different types of research and different types of action, and more of everything. And so I really want to thank all of the presenters for being here today. All of your contributions are so valuable across the spectrum of food security and food systems work, and community building. And it was really important to hear everything that you said. And I really also thank all of the participants for being here today. Thank you for attending. And on behalf of the conference planning team and panelists, I'd like to thank everyone for your engagement today in our event for the Promoting Food Security in Higher Education conference. And a quick reminder to register for more of the events if you have not already, and share the conference out through your networks. A recording of the event will be posted on the UBC Wellbeing YouTube channel, which was posted in the chat before. And it will also be linked to on our conference registration page. So yeah, please complete this poll that you can see that popped up in front of you with some feedback. And thank you so much. And we hope to see you again.